I've made mistakes that have cost me fish, and I don't want y'all to do the same. And these mistakes that I'm about to share with you aren't just mistakes that beginners make. I've seen experienced anglers make these mistakes too. So to help picture some of these mistakes, I am going to be using some illustrations, so forgive me for my poor drawing. So here I kind of have a poorly drawn picture of someone fishing, and I'll talk about the first mistake that people or anglers make is not casting far enough. So a couple of things that happen here since we have our blue, light blue fishing line here. Say someone cast to about right here, and they have a nice jig hanging out there, but they actually want to be fishing this brush pile that is right beneath where they are. So we're going to have this beautiful looking laydown right there, and might as well draw us a little bit of a ground here. I'll just draw a little bit of a floor there. And they want to fish this. Well, this isn't exactly going to work, because if they just let their lure fall in a pendulum style, what's going to happen is they're actually never even going to reach the bottom very good. So his jig is actually going to end up not even fishing anywhere near he wanted to. Now, if he decided to cast further, way out here, pretend that's his jig. Now we're going to pendulum right into our brush pile. You don't want to just pendulum right here. Really, when you cast, you want this lure to fall straight down below where you cast. So instead of keeping your line tight, pull out some line out of your bait caster or your spinning rod. Just pull 2, 3, 4 pulls. If it starts getting tight again, just pull another one. And that will allow, that slack will allow this bait to fall straight down, and you'll end up right here able to hop it up a few times and get it into your brush pile. So during that, I covered a couple things here. Not casting far enough will cause you not to be fishing the area that you think you're fishing. In this scenario, if you casted right above your brush pile, yes, you could have let some slack out and allowed the bait to fall directly on your brush pile. But you really want to start off on this side and just hop it through your brush pile. Also on the other end, if you're fishing a crankbait, if you don't cast it far enough, you're never going to reach optimum depth. Let's draw with a different color. Hopefully you guys can see this purple. Let's try this purple here. So say you cast here, and a crankbait's going to dive, 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 and then it's going to come back to you. Well, if you're trying to target somewhere over this brush pile, you need to cast way further. Now in this case, you're going to want to cast further than what I have available here. You're going to want to cast way out here, and then that's going to allow, I don't know if you guys can see, I'm going to be way out here. I can't even picture it for you guys, but let's pretend there's another brush pile over here somewhere. Let's draw it real quick. Draw this brush pile. This brush pile is going to be black in color. Let's draw another branch. There you go. So you cast here, you dive down, and if it's a deep diver, you can fish right above it just before you need to bring it up. So in this picture tutorial, this is crank, and this is other crank. So if you have some fish hanging out, I don't know, right above your brush pile, this isn't going to get there, this will. So one last thing about not casting far enough. If you're not casting far enough, you may be too far up on these fish and you may spook them. So imagine that this is only, I'm going to say like 5 foot of water. And you're this close to these fish. This fish is not going to like it. Well, that is a terrible looking fish. That's a better looking one. This fish is not going to like you being so close with your fancy little trolling motor with a big big blades. Wow, that's not too bad. That's a terrible looking trolling motor, so forgive me for that. But he's not gonna, these two fish here in this brush pile are not gonna like you being so close. If you were further back, such as you are with this fish is happy. He's got a big old smiley face here. He's hanging out. He's waiting for you to catch him. So being far enough away and making longer distance casts is less likely to spook those fish. Your bait still may do that from time to time, and that's just part of fishing. But keeping your boat, or even as a bank angler, staying away from that bank and staying a little further back and fishing those little pockets that are up close first before you fully approach is a great way to catch some bank fish. So make sure you stay away from the spots you intend on fishing until you thoroughly fish them, and then you can move up on them. Now, speaking about spooking fish and the casting part, there's another piece to this, and that is a mistake I've made several times myself here, is you're riding on your boat, you have your boat, and you're on plane, and you stop right next to the bank that you plan on fishing. That's not good either. You're going to cause all sorts of waves and ruckus way over there on the bank if you're fishing that bank, or if you're driving kind of right over those fish. They're not going to like that at all, especially if it's, you know, reasonably shallow. You're just going to spook them and have them scatter. So always get off plane way before the area that you plan on fishing. This gives you the highest probability of not spooking those fish and leaving them alone. All right, so real quickly, I want to recap. The first mistake here that we want to avoid is not casting far enough. If you don't cast far enough, you don't end up fishing the areas that you would like. And you also have a chance of spooking fish. And speaking of spooking fish, you don't want to be running up on fish. Now, you want to stay back as far as possible while still being able to fish that area. Before we move on to the third mistake, I want to ask you guys, what mistakes have you guys made while you've been fishing? What have you done that you absolutely know cost you at least one or two fish? Let me know in the comments below. So the third mistake that I see tons of people make, including myself from time to time, is not retying enough. Now, with the times that you need to retie, I have a couple examples here. Is if you're fishing, if you're fishing your jig or something, your Texas rig through rocks and brush, this kind of stuff will eat up your jig, your line, and that kind of stuff. You also want to retie after you catch a decent sized fish. Maybe not after a dink or something, but if you catch a pretty good sized fish for that size of line that you're using, you are going to want to retie every time. You never know, the next one may be your PB and maybe the biggest fish you ever catch in your entire life. And you don't want to be out there with a weak knot trying to get that fish in, and then it just breaks off right at the boat, and then you're just going to be really sad. So don't do that. Retie after catching a decent fish. So after fishing for a while, you may not actually be fishing timber or rock piles or anything of this kind of sort, but after a while, you may just want to check your line. Just rub your fingers right down through it, probably the first 3-4 feet down to your lure. You just want to feel that line and see if you feel any rough spots, frays, anything that might cause your line to be weak. Maybe do a visual inspection. It takes just a few seconds to do this every now and then, and I'm talking maybe every 30 minutes, maybe every 10 minutes. It depends on the type of fishing you're doing and how much strain you're putting on that line. So if you check it often and you feel like there's a weak spot in your line, cut it off, retie, and the next fish that you bring in, you'll be thinking to yourself, wow, I'm really glad I took the time to retie. So the fourth mistake here is all about equipment maintenance. So if you don't keep up with your equipment, it will fail on you when you need it the most, or cause you some frustrations with that technique that you're doing. So some of the things I'm talking about with equipment, let's switch colors here. You want to inspect your rod on a regular basis. And when I mean the rod, you can check out the blank. You can check out also your guides, your reel seat. You can also check out the handle as well. Those are all things that you need to check on your rod, and if any of them are in bad condition, you can always look to replace that rod. Some of these you can get replacement handles, you can get replacement guides. In my experience, I've always just taken the time to replace the entire rod. That's just my experience because I don't really buy all that expensive of rods. Now, if you buy $300, $400, $500 rods, you may look at repairing some of these things. Also, you want to check on your reel. Does it have, well, I don't know why I put REH, but you want to check on your reel. Is it smooth? That's both for casting and for retrieving. Are the handles nice and clean and smooth as well? Does the drag work properly? Well, I'm having a hard time with my spelling today, so forgive me. Does the drag work? I always test my drag every time I pick up a rod. Grab the line, pull it out, and test the drag. It's usually after drag sits for a little while, it will stick, so you want to make that initial break. And also, it's not a bad idea to adjust it. I mean, if it's off a little bit, adjust it to where it feels good, great. And I have had some buddies, they really try to mess with you. They'll loosen your drag way on back. You'll be out there fishing and you try to set the hook and you have nothing there. So you have those friends as well that like to play those pranks. So check your drag. Moving on along with our equipment, you want to check your line. How old is your line? Has it been 2 or 3 seasons since you last changed it? Well, then you probably should definitely change it. Do you store it outside? Is it stored outside? If it is, you probably should change it more often and start thinking about storing your reels and your rods inside, because nothing is worse than leaving that equipment out in the sun or in the heat or the cold. That'll definitely make your line more brittle. And one other piece here while we were talking about it, you want to check your hooks. Are your hooks all rusty? Do they not have sharp points on them? Rusty points. Are the barbs still in good shape? If you don't have good barbs, well, that's going to allow the fish to shake out the hook out of their mouth. And I'll just kind of draw a barb for you. So that's a regular hook there. And then the barb is this piece that's coming back. That's the barb. So in case you didn't know that. There it is. And we kind of hinted at the last piece of the equipment phase here. And that's, where are you storing your equipment? And I highly prefer if you stored your equipment inside. Maybe not inside the house, but maybe inside the garage. I have a little shop that I keep my stuff in. My boat stays in it as well. It's all out of the weather. It doesn't get direct contact with the sun. It doesn't get exposed to extreme temperatures. It still gets exposed to temperature changes, some low, some high, but it's not extreme temperature changes. I'm going to put some of these down. Temps, sun. Sun is a killer of all fishing equipment, especially fishing line. It will kill it in no time, no matter what kind you're using. Having it stored in the sun, you might as well start changing it out now. And there's also the rain aspect that causes rust. In case you're wondering, we have 2 more mistakes that we're going to cover, and the 5th one is one of my favorites, is having the net ready. What good is a net going to be in the storage compartment If it's in your storage compartment or in your rod locker, what good is that going to do? Mine is usually strapped on the deck, which is still not good enough. You need to unstrap it and have it at least there and ready. That way you walk down to it, you pick it up, and it's ready. Should be as simple as that. If you're having to fumble through a rod locker or unstrap things while you have a fish on in your right or left hand, it's just big trouble. You might lose that fish just because you're having to mess around. I highly recommend having your net ready, especially when you're fishing things with treble hooks. I'm going to use black here. So treble hooks, you're not going to want to stick your hand down there to grab that fish, mainly because it might get you. Head shakes always happen right there when you're about to grab them. I don't know why they do it, but they do it every time. So the last mistake that I see a lot of guys make, including myself, and it frustrates me when I do it and I catch myself doing it, is not letting the bait hit the bottom. Especially all those bottom fishing baits. That is just frustrating. So we'll go back to our illustration from earlier. I'll throw this guy over here. Oh, we're upside down. So like in this case, say you do cast far enough and you do a good job. You cast way here. We're going to use this green marker and you let it fall for a little bit. In fact, you do a good job when you let it fall straight down, and then you start reeling it in. And you make your path all the way back to the boat. You never let it hit the brush piles that you were trying to fish. Always bottom baits, give them enough time for the line to go slack. If you pull up and you don't feel anything on the bottom, if you're trying to really scrape the bottom down here, there's always going to be a rough spot or two here for your bait to hit. As soon as your bait hits it, you'll know that you're on the bottom. Also, if you peel up the slack and you still see movement in your line, give it a little more slack and let it finish falling. I like to do myself a little personal cadence of how long that bait should take to fall. So I usually have a 10-foot rule in my head. And if you don't know that real quick, you just pull out 10 foot of line, which most rods are roughly 7.5 foot long. So you just need a line that's, 2.5 foot longer than your rod. That's roughly 10 foot. Drop it down in the water real fast, and then whenever the line gets tight, that is the time that it takes for your bait to fall 10 feet. And just count it out in Mississippi's or whatever you like to count in your head, and that's how much time it takes to fall 10 feet. So if you're fishing 10 foot of water and the bait takes 3 seconds to fall 10 feet, if you reel in before 3 seconds is up, well, you're not fishing the bottom. Simple as that. If you're fishing 20 feet and your bait falls 10 feet every 3 seconds, well, you need to wait at least 6 seconds before you even think about starting to reel in. Pretty simple math. I like doing the 10 foot thing because I'm usually fishing roughly intervals of 10 foot. And if it's 15 foot, I'm going to wait the 20 foot time. Pretty easy. A couple more things about letting the bait hit the bottom is, let's move on over to the other one. And let's grab a different color here. Is you want to be using the right weight. If you're not using the right weight, well, it's going to take forever for the bait to hit the bottom. If you're using too heavy of a weight, it's going to get all snagged up and caught up in here all the time. You want to use the right amount of weight that is appropriate to your situation. Another thing you want to do is you always, and I mean absolutely always, watch the line. Why? A lot, and I mean a lot of bites come on the fall of a bait. So if you're not watching that line and just have a super slack line that you're not watching, and you have a couple bumps, you won't even feel it on your rod tip. So if your line is slack, you need to be watching your line. Simple as that. And I promise you start doing that, you're going to see a lot more bites than you actually thought you were getting. Alright guys, I hope going over these mistakes will keep them in the forefront of your mind the next time you're out fishing. That way you're not making these mistakes over and over again, costing you fish. And if you've ever made one of these mistakes before, make sure you leave this video a like. And if you're interested in learning how to catch more fish, I'm going to put up a couple more videos right here for you to click on. Make sure you check on one of those. We're going to keep doing content like this for you guys. But just like always, until next time, get out there and go catch you some fish.